And then you might see that, oh, this asset might not have a great rate of engagement as far as clicking on the link on a blog post or a LinkedIn post or what have you. But then they're actually downloading the asset at a higher ratio than something that looked really pretty, but then wasn't engaged with on the back end. And so it's kind of making sure that you're really dissecting those things to better understand what it is that your buyer is looking for, and then as well as what are your sellers finding valuable once they actually have them on the phone and are speaking to these buyers to uncover needs and answer questions.
And that's a wrap. The weekly wrap, ending Friday, July 10th, 2020. This week, we're wondering which shoe is going to drop, and where are we going to spend all this money that we're going to get in 2021? And 5 content lessons you can learn from the good news. So let's wrap it up, shall we? Our theme this week, the bad news and the good news. As Doug Larson once said, bad news travels fast. Good news, it takes the scenic route. That's the bad news, but this is the weekly wrap. Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode number 77 of the Weekly Wrap, our weekly play on words at play in the world this week. This week, we've got some wonderful thoughts on good news and bad news, and we've got a wonderful interview with Marissa Gbenro, someone who's truly making their mark on the content marketing wall. So, as always, I'm your host, Robert Rose, Chief Strategy Advisor with the Content Marketing Institute, and it's time to get this week's show underway. Which shoe are you waiting for? Do you want the good news first or the bad news? Now, research shows that about most people, 88% or so, prefer to get the bad news first. So here it is. We've got another half of 2020 left to go. Now, I might prefer to actually give you the good news first. That same study that I just mentioned found that people would rather give news in the complete opposite order in which we would prefer to receive it. Most of us simply want to postpone or avoid giving bad or negative information altogether. Here's an unscientific but interesting test. Run a Google search for first the good news, and you'll get about 5 million results or so. Run a same search for first the bad news, and you'll find just over 1 million results. You see, people also overestimate their ability to judge how bad or how good the news is. Have you ever been asked, do you want the good news first or the bad news first? Only to have that person go, no, I forget that. I'm going to give you the good news first because the bad news is not so bad. And then once you hear it all, you're like, yeah, you were really wrong about that. By the way, the good news, we have another half of 2020 left to go. Think about the time between the good and the bad news. There's an interesting thing there as well. Even if the bad news is delivered first, and in time, before the good news actually arrives, it tends to fill us with anxiety and dread. People are waiting for the other shoe to drop. But wait a minute. Why does the other shoe dropping have to incite dread? Couldn't it inspire hope? Now, the idiom, waiting for the other shoe to drop, originated in the earliest 20th century in New York in large apartment buildings. It was normal to hear your upstairs neighbor come in after a long day and remove their shoes. After the first shoe hit the ground with an expected thud, there would be a second expected thud waiting for the other shoe. That completed the news that your neighbor was indeed home. I think that the other shoe came to be so closely associated with bad news because of the anxiety created from expecting another jarring disruption when that other shoe was going to drop. Now, the general expectation here, hundreds of years later, has become that if there's any news that follows an initial surprise, well, it must be bad news. But guess what? There's no rule that says that. There's no law that says that. We might just need another pair of shoes. Now I've got more good news. And the good news is that it's time to recognize that we can put the experience back in customer experience. There's a well-known marketing saying that goes, content is king. And with organizations all over beginning to rely on digital channels more than ever, these days, in order to create customers and create publishing as effective as we can, we've got to take engaging content to a whole new level. So Sitecore, the company, recently held its inaugural Virtual Marketers Day, and one of the tracks there was dedicated to helping marketing organizations get better managing their content from end to end. There's a new post-event guide that I want you to go download. It's called Understanding the End-to-End Content Lifecycle. It's got practical steps that are going to help you optimize your content engine, personalize digital experience, and put that experience back in the customer experience. You can get that download today, and I want you to look at the URL that's right on the screen there. It's cmi.media/Sitecore-lifecycle. That URL again, cmi.media/Sitecore-lifecycle. Go download that guide today. It's going to make you a lot smarter, and just thankful for the Sitecore folks for their wonderful sponsorship of our show. Well, now it's time for our interview segment, and we have a really great one for this show. It's Marissa Gbenro. Marissa is really smart marketer. She is the senior content marketing strategist at HighSpot, and prior to life at HighSpot, she worked to drive corporate marketing strategy for True Blue. That was across 600 locations, the U.S., Canada, Puerto Rico. And throughout her career, Marissa has really focused on strategic content development, content optimization, buyer engagement, internal usage of data and insights. She's just a very well-rounded marketer. She's got a ton of great information around persona and leveraging B2B content marketing for distinct personas. She and I talked a little bit about the latest CMO spend survey from Gartner, the research firm, which is now just out, by the way. And then we also talked a little bit about content performance and how looking at that through the lens of heat maps and persona development is really optimal. There's just a wonderful, wonderful wealth of information from Marissa here. I think you're really going to like this.
Marissa, my friend, how are you doing? It's been a long time since I've seen you.
I know it's been 2 whole months, Robert. I am good. Just, routining, staying safe, staying home. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm noticing your background there. You've got quite the it looks like the New York style apartment you've got going on there.
Yes, the lovely West Elm catalog in the background here. Lovely.
Oh my gosh, that's so perfect. My wife is addicted to West Elm, by the way. Yeah, so I know the look well.
You recognized it.
I do recognize it. Exactly right. For the benefit of those in the audience, you and I have known each other for some time. We just did a webinar together. But for those in the audience who don't know who you are, catch everybody up. Tell us your story.
So I am the senior Senior Manager of Content Marketing at HighSpot. And before HighSpot, I worked at an organization called True Blue doing some content strategy. And so been in content for quite a few years now, love it. And, really my job is to make sure that sellers are able to find the content that they need and that it's as effective as possible. And really learning from the usage and engagement of content to make sure that what the content marketing team at HighSpot is creating really resonates with our audience and is driving as much demand and awareness as possible. Yeah.
Nice. And I know, it's one of those things where, during the webinar, we talked about it, it is a time right now when people are pivoting hard to this, right? This idea of content and performance and how to do that with personas and all of that. Are I'm sure you're seeing that as well.
Absolutely. I think that now more than ever, content, it has really gotten a spotlight it hasn't before, in the importance now that we can't go to physical events to drive demand and move deals through the funnel. You really have to rely on your digital assets, right? And so that's content. Everything from product marketing can be considered content, but what I do specifically is top of funnel content. And so that's making sure that people know what the organization is, what we do, and really driving that urgency and making sure that they want to learn more and they are willing to, schedule a demo with a sales rep. So it's definitely getting shine right now, and I'm happy to see it.
Right. Exactly. Those trips, the online trips to West Elm are becoming okay now, right?
I'm very excited.
Exactly. Well, I would love to get your take, because this sort of pivot, this idea of moving to content and as a part of the portfolio of marketing is only becoming, we're seeing it as well, where so much of this is becoming a bigger piece of our budget. And the news this week sort of underlines all of that. And I would love to get your take on it. And of course, it's from Gartner. What the article that we'll link to in the show notes, of course, is from from Media Post, and it's part of their Marketing Daily. And it's about Gartner, of course, and their CMO survey that they do every year. It's just been released, and it says Gartner CMO spend survey shows that digital budgets will increase in 2021. And this is certainly something that we would think would be, a part and parcel with, in a post-COVID world. But the article opens up by saying, look, digital advertising, business to consumer, B2C marketing budgets are expected to grow by 78% in aggregate in 2021. This is according to Gartner's 2020-2021 CMO spend surveys. Among CMOs, 78% cite rising budgets for social in 2021, 71% for mobile, 71% for websites, 69% for SEO, 65% for partner and affiliate marketing, 64% for paid search, 63% for email marketing, and 58% for offline advertising, and even 57% for event marketing, which seems a little odd to me. Maybe this was done the survey questions were done pre. I would suspect that those numbers would shift a little bit if we're asked today. So what do you think about all of these numbers and where this means and where CMOs are prioritizing their budget in context with where everything you're seeing with content go?
Yeah. So I think it's spot on as far as where spend is going, other than the events. Maybe, they're investing in platforms to hold virtual events, then it would make a little more sense. Yeah. But I think the sense that, at least what I'm experiencing and what it sounds like the survey results are also showing, is that the spend is moving to digital. And that's been a trend for years. But I think especially now, due to COVID, we aren't able to leave our house for long periods of time, surely aren't traveling as much as we used to. And so what that says to me is that now more than ever, content in particular, but also digital as far as social and demand generation, so on and so forth, it has become more important than ever for CMOs. Yes, it's always been a slice of the pie, but now, me in particular, are taking on more jobs than we were before, because now there's areas that we're trying to uncover that maybe weren't within our scope of business before, but we have to shine a light on it, and we need to get scrappy and innovative and make sure that we're addressing and hitting all targets and making sure that we are as efficient as possible. I think the two big takeaways for me from this survey is that marketers have to find ways to become more efficient and effective. And so what that means is really honing your skills to say, okay, this is what performed well, this is what didn't, and why is that? And that leads me to my second point. It's important now more than ever to really understand buyer insights. And so what are buyers consuming? Is it the title? Make sure that you're testing. It might be the title, and then they're not really clicking through to the document once they get to your landing page, right? And so then that tells you, is it the asset itself is just not really compelling? And those are things that we really, as content marketers, need to focus on in a time like this, because we don't really have a lot of room for error. Your competitors are really doing the same things and are vying for those same eyes. So we have to make sure that you're going to hit the target a lot more precisely than your competitors are. And that means being aware of your buyers as well as your sellers. So what are your sellers consuming, and what do they find useful as they're going through the sales funnel and having these conversations?
I think that's such an important point that you make. One of the things that we've been following a little bit and sort of diving deep on as a challenge is the preciousness of the time that we're getting with consumers these days, where digital has to be a proxy in many ways for the physical experience that we can create, whether it's in a store or whether it's with a sales guy at a conference or whether it's a cafe or a lunch or a round of golf or, it's just digital has to be a much bigger proxy these days than ever before. And it was already a huge, right? And so getting this precious moment with a customer and not wasting it and really understanding their, the insights into their journey is such an important piece of this, right?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I think that, the more people kind of come together and realize that you can make things efficient and effective when you're really looking at the cause and effect. And so taking a look at what your sellers are using to make sure that what you're creating really resonates with them and they find valuable when they're handling objections and they're trying to get buyers to answer the phone and email them back and respond to messages. So what are they finding valuable to send to buyers? And then taking a look and saying, okay, well, this is the content that's resonating the most as far as click-throughs. And then this is what people are actually downloading and spending time viewing and really digesting. And that sometimes is not the same thing. You might have, buyers who are clicking through on something a lot, but then actually aren't spending time with it or downloading it. And then you might see that, oh, this asset might not have a great rate of engagement as far as clicking on the link on a blog post or a LinkedIn post or what have you. But then they're actually downloading the asset at a higher ratio than something that looked really pretty, but then wasn't engaged with on the back end. And so it's kind of making sure that you're really dissecting those things to better understand what it is that your buyer is looking for. And then as well as what are your sellers finding valuable once they actually have them on the phone and are speaking to these buyers to uncover needs and answer questions.
Yeah, I mean, it just couldn't be more. I mean, look, I know you're doing a ton of thinking in this space, and one of the things, and one of the reasons I was so grateful to get you on the show was during the webinar that you and I did together. You showed off this heat mapping process that you've been working on, that I just think is super cool. I just think it's one of the neatest things. And I told you, of course, during the, but I just wanted to make sure that we get it shared out there. Tell the audience a little bit about this heat mapping process that you've been working on and how it sort of fits in with getting those buyer insights that are so important in terms of whether something looks pretty or not. We got to look at what's working.
Yeah. So this was born out of an internal conversation that, we were having of sellers asking for case studies. And I think that every marketer, whether you're product, content, you have this conversation of we need more customer testimonials, we need more customer voice. And we were looking at the analytics of the usage on the case studies that we currently had. And we said, we have a lot of case studies, but only a few of them are being used. And so then this posed a broader question of, well, we really need to understand what our sellers are using and what buyers are engaging with. Do we really need more case studies, or do we need to make sure that our sellers are able to find the 19 that we already have? And so then we decided, okay, what we're going to do is create this heat map template, and it's through Excel. And essentially what you do is you take the number of views, you import all of your assets. So all of your case studies, everything from content marketing, product marketing, customer marketing, we inputted it into an Excel document. And then we also put in the usage. So how many times sellers were pitching it out, sending it to buyers using the assets, and then the corresponding numbers of engagement externally. So how many buyers were downloading it, opening the email, spending time with the asset itself, whatever it be, videos, PDFs, PowerPoint slides. And then we were able to overlay colors on top of it to tell you what's really hot, what people are engaging with very much, versus what's not really doing so well, isn't, the buyer's favorite. And that was really able to show a visual representation of our content landscape to say, hey, here's what's working and here's what's not. And then we also were able to put ratios to it. So something might be pitched 1,000 times and used 100, which you think is great because it's 100 engagements from your buyers. That's awesome. But then you might have an asset that you've pitched 200 times and is receiving engagement numbers of, 50. Well, if you do the math, that's the 200, that you're sending out to buyers and it's receiving engagements of 50. That ratio is actually higher than what you thought was doing really well, just because, it was receiving somewhat engagement for the amount of times you were throwing it out into the ocean. And so it really allowed us as content marketers to say, hey, guess what? This is what's working and here's what's not. And we were able to provide that feedback to our enablement team and our sellers, who were really grateful to have the information, because all they know is their point of reference, right? So if they're not aware of what everyone else is doing and what the numbers look like, they're thinking, oh, well, this worked this one time, I sent it out, so I just did it again and I did it again. They have their list of favorites. But when we were able to broaden the scope and say, no, actually, here's what's doing the best and you haven't even used it, then they were able to say, oh, wow, okay, this is really useful for me because I can see the best practices of what everyone is doing, not just myself. And then for me personally, I was able to go in and say, wow, okay, this is what's doing well, here's what's not, and then find common themes. So what we were seeing is, and it made so much sense, at the top of the funnel, analyst reports, thought leadership, things really explaining the importance of what our platform did, performed the best early on because people didn't know what high spot was, what we did. They might not even know what sales enablement is. And so it allowed us to kind of guide them along this journey of thought leadership and say, hey, this is why it's important. Here are what the stats and experts are saying. And then you can kind of talk about the product when people have come with you on this journey to understand what you do, what your company is, and then they say, okay, now I have the budget, I see the importance in this, and are willing to actually, purchase the product, as opposed to here's what we are and what we do, and bombarding buyers with that early on just is very aggressive, and they're not ready for that. And so you're not going to receive the engagements that you could have had you provided the content that they needed when they needed it. So it's been received very well and has been really helpful for us internally on just making sure that we're cleaning up our landscape to map to what is actually working for our sellers and buyers.
It's an amazing tool because, as we talked about before, I think, and you just mentioned is such an important point, which is, the content that is most popular internally is maybe not the most popular content or the most effective content externally.
It's a hard lesson to learn, but
right, especially because you spent so much on that cool brochure, right? I mean, this
so
amazing
much time invested.
Photography was amazing.
It was definitely heartbreaking for a few of the assets when for me personally, and I'm like, what? I did all this research and I wrote these beautiful words and it was displayed so gracefully, and then realizing that no, that's actually not what buyers enjoyed the most. But sometimes it was nice because I did get vindicated when I'm like, I knew this asset was amazing and here are the numbers to prove it. And I think it also helps it allows you to have a conversation about the data with enablement and sales to say, I'm providing you best practices based on literally what the numbers show and are saying. And that kind of makes it more of guidance that you're providing to those teams, as opposed to, well, I'm marketing, I want you to use the assets that I for when I created it. No, now you can have conversation. Hey, the data shows that this asset is great for further down the funnel, but when it's really performing its best and most effective, is here, instead of when you were pitching it, which was early on. So it also helps provide guidance on the buyer's journey for our sellers as well, to say it might not be the asset at all. It might be a great asset, but it's actually being sent out to buyers at time. So then we can have conversations about when to use specific assets and key themes that we notice of, again, thought leadership early on, information later down the funnel. And it's been really useful in having those conversations, and then also fun to see the numbers as well when you start to see that it's being used in the frame and point in the buyer's journey that you recommend. And that has actually been very beneficial for our sellers, because they're like, yeah, no, I've actually seen more engagement because I'm pitching it here. And I'm like, yes, this is my job. This is what I'm
Right,
here
exactly.
for, and I'm glad that it's working out.
Yeah, exactly. Well, my friend, I could totally geek out with you all day on this. This is one of my new favorite tools. I love this so much. For those in the audience, where can they connect with you? Where can they connect with this cool tool? Where should they connect with you online?
Thank you, Robert. So they can find the heat map and a blog that kind of lays out each stage that we took to get to the point of optimizing your content landscape, that you'll provide in the notes. And so it's highspot.com/blog. And then we'll have the link provided so that they can read the blog and download the heat map itself. And then for me personally, I'm on LinkedIn, so you can find me at just Marissa Gbenro on LinkedIn. So thank you so much for having me. It's been
absolutely, my friend. Thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate it.
It's all my pleasure. Thanks, Robert.
That brings us to our last segment, which is one post on CMI's site that I'd love for you to take another look at, a first look at, an 11 billionth look at. It's from June, and it's from the wonderful Scott Ottman, and it's basically just a wonderful post around a show that you've probably seen, which is John Krasinski's Some Good News, and it's 5 content lessons that we can learn as marketers from that show. Scott goes through how the show accumulated more than 2 million subscribers in its 8 weekly episodes. And my favorite part is where he talks about partnering and how Krasinski really partnered with other good news sites like Tank's Good News and Good News Network. He saw them not as competitors, but as actually content partners, and incorporated them into the SGN broadcasts. But the other thing that he also talks about is how, of course, he brought in his famous friends like Steve Carell and Oprah Winfrey and Jon Stewart and Steven Spielberg. And yeah, this is where basically being a celebrity and being handsome and all of that really helps you build an audience. But it's a little bit like what my friend Joe Polizzi always says. It's that it's way easier to build an audience when you have an audience. And so that's one of the benefits actually of content marketing is as you start building an audience, it's much easier to launch new things that build audiences. And so yes, it was easier for John Krasinski, but we can learn a lot from that as well. And this post takes you through some other things that I think that are really valuable as you want to duplicate some of the things that Krasinski did to build his audience in such record time. It's just a wonderful post. I want you to go check it out and either reread it or read it again for the first time. And well, Well, that's a wrap of episode number 77. I hope you're all truly, truly well and taking care of each other these days. I'm grateful that you've taken a pause in your day to watch this show. And really, I hope you're digging it because we're having a lot of fun making it. Go out there, wear your masks, go out there, enjoy life, but take a pause and thank you for watching this show. And let us know, won't you? Hashtag us up at Weekly Wrap on social media. Let us know about any guests you want to see, any particular content or news items that you'd like to see. We're always playing with the format of the show. And, well, if you hate it, like if you didn't like it at all, like you watched this and went, what the hell is this? Well, in the immortal words of the band Nazareth, I'm young, I know, but even so, I know a thing or two that I've learned from you. I really learned a lot. Love is like a flame, and it burns you when it's hot. Love hurts. Oh, love hurts. But for now, waiting for that other shoe to drop. The bad news. It's always the bad news, right? I mean, you don't usually hear, she just got engaged to the love of her life. Wait till the other shoe drops. No, nobody says that. And even if we did say that, the implication wouldn't be that the follow-up news is great and they just got an amazing new house together. It would be something bad, right? And she just found out her partner got fired for embezzlement. And that's weird. As communicators, we can learn from these observations. The first lesson is to acknowledge and resist our tendency to focus on our own emotional concern, avoiding the bad news by delivering the good news first. Instead, let's recognize the preference of our audience, get that bad news out of the way. The second lesson, and maybe this is even more important, is that the other shoe, it doesn't have to be bad news, even if the first shoe was. When I told you that the bad news that we still have half of 2020 yet to go, and the good news is, well, exactly the same as the bad news, did that feel like a jolt, or did it feel like a relief? Despite the bad news shoe that fell in the early half of 2020, I take the second shoe as good news. I think we got the bad news out of the way first. I'm waiting, hoping, and readying for a much better second half to 2020. I'm waiting for a second shoe so I can use it to run faster, jump higher, and eventually hear it fall with a great, big, beautiful boom. It's your story to tell, folks. Tell it well. See you next week on The Weekly Wrap.